Okay, Aquarela. I'm actually really happy we're talking about this film because I think there's a lot to talk about. Um, I think it, as a film in itself, there might not be so much to sort of break down and analyze, but I think it brings up really big ideas about what filmmaking is, what documentary is today, especially today, what impact documentary is, and really what climate change, and also I guess what climate change documentaries are about. I think, yeah, I mean, I think I watched it in the cinema. I watched it with a few people. I think it's clearly a sort of visual experience about water. I think selling it as a climate change documentary was a really big mistake. It is whatever. I read some things about it. They said it's an ode to water. And I think that's what it should have been sold as, because it did sort of take us on a journey of sort of ice and then sort of like violent waves and then waterfalls. But even then, I was really unhappy with the depiction of water. I think the music threw me off and made me think that it was sort of about the rage of water and sort of Mother Earth getting angry and sort of having this like rageful like fight against the world. And I think I fundamentally just think it wasn't successful at making an inanimate object, which is water, I guess, empathetic at all. Air Day, which I'm probably going to talk about a lot, did this, and somehow it just was way more emotionally provocative, I guess. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things to say about it. I guess my biggest question when I left was, okay, there's not like a clear narrative. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But if this is an ode to water, who is it for? Because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I didn't really see the point of it either. Full disclosure, I wasn't able to see it in the cinema, so I found a link on I think it's like the Russian version of Facebook, but they illegally host quite a lot of most films on there. So I found a link to watch on my laptop.
Okay, well, we're not promoting that though.
And no, I'm saying it more as like a kind of apology, but
Disclaimer.
It's a disclaimer. And I went in with the best of intentions. I had a 180p HD resolution ready, but then it started buffering. So then I had to put it down to 480p before I could watch it.
From 1080 to 480.
God,
right?
that is so bad.
And then I was also cooking at the same time. After a while, not the whole time, but no, I thought it was really like surprisingly really pointless and I don't know, just kind of misguided. I don't really know. It felt like a sort of Vimeo staff pick more than a film, or
I would even add that that's an insult to Vimeo staff picks, I think.
It probably is, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'd go that far. I think it took me a while, but once I really, and the thing is that there are some images that are really striking and beautiful, and I think the filmmakers made a huge deal about, that was what the marketing was about. This is the most dangerous film that's ever been made. That's what they said.
Why is it dangerous?
Because of the, well, obviously, when it opens with these, with the sort of cars driving through that ice lake, and they fall. So obviously having a camera in that ice lake is super dangerous because all of your equipment might just fall into, freezing water and disappear.
I just want to counter that and say two films that come to mind. Fitzcarraldo, Herzog's movie with your man pulling the boat over.
But is it more dangerous?
There's got to be more dangerous films than that.
And this film Raw, I think, in which I think something like 50 people were injured during that. Don't take me on that, on my word, but it's a movie with live lions.
What about Salo Pasolini got killed for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. Regardless, they kind of like pitched this. I did a little bit of reading after that, and they were like, okay, so they pitched it as like sort of one of the most dangerous documentaries to be made.
I think that's kind of like a testament to the pointlessness of it, that you could think that that's a sort of like valid, like a value for a film is that it's dangerous.
I think that, and I think that's what, when I came out, my initial reaction was absolute rage, and it wasn't rage because of the music, the metal music over the waves crashing. It wasn't because of that. It was rage because, and I know this goes away from filmmaking and kind of comes outside of film criticism and looking at films as audience members, but I'm really angry that people are spending that much money making a film about the climate. And this is what I was really, really angry about. I was like, that if this is about the climate, which you're marketing it as, it's not reaching an audience that would actually make a difference. You're not going to change climate deniers' point of view with this, or people that sit in the middle. I was telling George, like a meme or a viral image of a turtle with a straw actually did more for the climate than this $2.5 million documentary.
Is that how much it cost?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
So I guess for me, it was just kind of like, I know that there is a time for visual documentaries that are exploratory and that are visually stunning, but I guess, especially with climate change, it's like, haven't we gotten to the point now where we actually need something that has an impact, because we're all just and that's what that film was. We're all just watching the glaciers melt away, and that's it. We're just watching it. So I almost felt like I was complicit in, which maybe is the point.
The film's aesthetic is almost like, look how cool this looks.
Yeah.
These glaciers are melting.
And I think the one part of the movie that kind of offers any answers to why this film was made, or what the intentions of the filmmaker were, because I think I was thinking about how in fact we should approach criticizing this film and in what context we should do that. And I think at the end of the film, a title card comes up and says this film is dedicated to Alexander Sokolov, which is the Russian Tarkovsky's protege and also influencer on slow cinema. And I think that is maybe a good starting point for us to look at what the intentions of the filmmaker were. I think if I were an executive at one of the dozens of soft funding bodies from Germany to Scotland to, I think even Italy's in there, some Scandinavian companies that gave some of their soft government money funds towards this, I'd be screwing, because
it's a BFI as well, isn't it?
Yeah, mate, I didn't see that.
They were the title.
Right.
Credit.
But I think I don't know, maybe we can look into this a little bit more, and so I'm responsible for not having done that as of yet. But it's interesting to think about, firstly, was the money given before they shot this footage? I would suspect not. I think that a lot of it was shot, for the way that the movie opens, maybe that was shot before, and then they gave them some money to go and finish it. I don't know, but it feels like my takeaway from the movie is this is a film that has been cobbled together out of 4 or 5 different unrelated events, and I think that the movie, the idea that it's an ode to water is, I would put my money on it being an absolute afterthought to the.
I was imagining
images.
I was actually trying to imagine like the way they would have been pitching that film to try and get money, and
I think the pitch is appealing. I think water is something worth looking into. It's the reason we're alive. It's it's responsible for everything on Earth. I've seen a lot of different artists work with water because it's kind of trendy right now, and I hate to say trendy because it's essential. But I think they all put it in the context of what water means to humans.
Yeah, I think so. Watching the film, I think the first 20 minutes we have this footage. Again,
the first 20 minutes are great.
Firstly, there was no hint of location, so all of this footage wasn't even pulled together by location title cards or by one location.
I don't
There
think
was
you
no
needed that though,
but my problem was there was no continuity in the images. You know, it's not Koenistaski,
Yeah.
or you know, it's not that movie, and it
Yeah.
the Sokurov reference is. I think he's trying to do this.
Mhm.
He's trying to do some version of slow cinema. Again,
But
maybe
it-
I'm wrong for the reference to Sokurov, but
No, I
the-
don't think you are. There's a
my-
moment where he does the Tarkovsky dream sequence under the water through through the glaciers, and it almost feels like this dream. That you know, it
Yeah.
seems like he's doing that, but I guess it wasn't one thing or the other. It
But my
wasn't
issue with that, the first 20 minutes, is we have all this quite terrifying footage of people going under the ice and the rescuers rescuing them and taking the cars out from under the ice, and then we see that somebody's actually drowned, and then one of the I think they're Russians. Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the rescuers, one of the team says, "Why are you on the ice at this time of year?" And one of the people that just nearly drowned says, "Well, it usually melts 3 weeks later than this." And that was the point where I was like, "Okay, you were slow, but you got me. Like that's what this movie's about.
It's
is
about
melting
climate change.
But
then
and
it
then it
turned
just
into
doesn't
something
take
else.
that
Yeah.
anywhere. And then you have these loose the woman on the boat, the people in what I assumed was some South American country with the waterfalls, and it just has no coherence at all.
Yeah.
No, I don't know about the Tarkovsky thing, but it just reminded me of like universities, people would get stoned and watch like YouTube compilations called "People Are Awesome," which
Or
is
like a
just
Planet Earth kind of.
like yeah,
style,
But just
of
not as
Planet
good.
Earth. But it was
Mhm.
there were videos. They were just like people doing like stupid stunts, but they were awesome. So I guess they came off. But this to me felt like that, but with the camera and the shots it was getting, and it was much more about what the filmmakers were capable of than the subject.
Yeah.
Which is actually surely kind of the opposite of what it's trying to
Well,
achieve.
it's not. That's not the intention. And when I read stuff after, I read a few things that he said, and he would talk a lot about the crew and how they felt after. I think he said, he said something like, "My team was so shocked. He kept thinking to ourselves, did we make it? We're still alive." And then he said something like, it's all about the fight. And I think it was all of these quotes that, and I kind of think this is where the rock, the sort of metal came in. I think that he felt as he made this film that he really fought to make this. You know, it was
But there's no sense of that in the film.
there's no sense of it, but I have feeling that. So I guess it felt like at the end it was so much more about the filmmakers and them being badass doing this. You know, they went to the hurricanes
Being
and
awesome.
being awesome, and they were in the hurricane in I think it was
Florida.
Miami. Yeah.
But from that, let me add, we know that intention was there, or we can kind of prove the intention was there from the music, from the way that it was shot, from the marketing of the film. So it's not a kind of we're not projecting a false intention
what was
onto the
deal with
filmmaker.
the music? Because
The music was
time,
so
Exactly.
confusing.
the second time those heavy guitars,
Yeah.
like a Russian MMA fighter's entrance music came on.
And then at one
that's
point
why I
there was
turned off
something.
the film, to be honest.
But that, just to add to
Uh-huh.
that, so that was during the middle sequence where there was just lots of waves and some slow motion
Yeah.
stuff. But then at the end of the film, after the Florida footage, I don't know if you got to that.
No.
The footage was actually really good, but then
Yeah.
they started using a classical score.
Yeah.
So
it was
not
very
only
music
was the choice
confusing.
of music didn't quite work for me, which is a subjective thing.
Mhm.
I don't think the filmmakers knew what they were doing with their soundtrack because they just
Mhm.
switched halfway through.
The guitar music seemed kind of ironic. Like I thought that at first I thought that was the use. It was kind of like a self-parody of what the images were conveying. Like it was sort of deliberately admitting that they were a bit like bloated and bombastic.
Wait, the guitar is the metal?
Yeah, like the kind
Okay.
of crunching.
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought it
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
was the filmmakers sort of poking fun at themselves a bit, being like, "Oh, we're kind of dicks."
Mm.
At best.
I
But-
don't know
but,
because I guess that at the end it's about this journey. It's about this journey. Literally, you know, the glaciers break, they fall, they go into the ocean. The ocean is rageful. Then you sort of, I believe, it's a flood and you know a hurricane, and then we sort of end up in Venezuela.
How did you know it's Venezuela?
I think I looked it up, but also I know I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually.
Has a dam burst in that footage? Like a dam has burst, or there's something that's overflowing.
I think so, but it
and
wasn't
there's people
clear.
hiding somewhere.
It wasn't very clear. No, there was some footage of this flood and where there was like a sense that a dam had burst, and then there was the waterfall. And the waterfall bit, I don't know. I guess it obviously made me think of Allah for Eliasson, you know, the artist, and I don't know. I guess he just wanted to make it this sort of soft like journey of water, but the music really threw me off in this whole idea of this journey of water because if anything, water is like the most malleable form in the world.
But I think it's not necessarily that the music has to reflect our idea of what water might sound like. But I think there was no continuity of music. I would have preferred it to have been just footage of waves and an hour and a half long metal guitar soundtrack.
But why does it need music? Like the water is music.
I think it would have been
bizarre.
more powerful without, like, I guess my biggest thing is, like, there were some images that were beautiful. There was this one, I don't know if you guys remember, there was like a hole in the glacier, and then the water would come, and it would sort of it was gorgeous.
Yeah, that was that was my favorite moment.
It was,
in the film.
it was so
like,
beautiful.
When the camera was kind of traveling.
No, it's a shot.
Quickly.
It's a shot from above the ice. It's a stationary shot.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like there's a hole in the water, but the edges of the ice keep going under and then back above the water, and the ice makes this like
this crackling kind of
sound.
sound, and then you see all of these forms.
Yeah,
and it is beautiful.
It's like glass.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
The shot that I liked most was I think it's just after. You know, the guy, is he drunk or concussed? He keeps falling over.
Yeah, he's concussed.
Concussed, yeah. That makes
His
more
friend
sense.
has just died under the ice.
Yeah. I thought maybe he'd have a drink to take the edge off it. But the camera's traveling really fast. I think it seems like it might be underwater, but I guess it's not. Over this cracking ice. It goes on for like maybe a minute.
I think that's the
seconds.
sequence that Shalini was talking about with the Tarkovsky thing. It was like it's underwater. The camera's underwater.
The camera is
with all the
underwater.
ice,
Okay, that I like that just because it was the only moment in the film to me where everything wasn't like crystal clear and HD. It was a bit more, and I don't know if it was intentionally like this. Beyond that's how they got the shot, but it was kind of more abstract and
actually the
mysterious.
and
that was so lacking in the rest of the film, I thought.
The abstract shots are really nice. There was also that bit where there was like the glaciers and just sort of looking at the glaciers almost like they were a body, like a sculpture. It was gorgeous, but it was like, I guess in the end, it's like the set, like that awe that you get with those few shots just wasn't there.
Yeah, and I think the kind of ultra HD, I don't know what it was.
I think it was 96 frames. It was shot in 96 frames per second.
Yeah,
I didn't.
Which I don't know.
I feel like that is so at odds with the film as well. Like, if kind of nature, the water, and technology, like man's or human progress, is at odds. It's like those are two completely contradicting things, and I just kept thinking like the heaviness of this really overdeveloped technology was just kind of like not complementing the purity and the essentialness of what it was filming, and that just kind of, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. It felt kind of
I think the problem is he introduces humans, which he, and I actually, again, I read up on this, and he did say the first 20 minutes are actually a trick for the audience to keep them there. And for me, it's like, actually, had you not brought in, because there are, you know, we talked about Erde. I think Erde, the reason Erde is so powerful is
Have you seen that, Theo?
Oh, it's so good. And the reason it's so powerful is it's because it does relate the work people are doing, excavating the earth or whatever, and does talk to them. So it has a very clear relationship with human beings. Whereas this clearly didn't want to have a relationship with human beings, but then placed them in random places.
and didn't give them a place in the film narratively.
Yeah, didn't give them any place. That girl on the boat had absolutely no.
Well, I thought
narrative.
at first, okay, we've got the first 20 minutes with these, drivers on the ice that are drowning, and then, okay, now we're with another woman who's in a boat in the middle of and that got quite tense.
It did.
And then I would have maybe forgiven it a little bit more if it was like two halves, but
I guess that is about like like one human sort of fighting.
But it was two.
It was two.
Okay, and they showed the one shot. I just think, like, just following on my other thought, I think all of these small things, the music, the technology versus the nature, the issues with the humans, it gets at the larger issue of the filmmaker or filmmakers not really knowing what they were doing with the film and not really having any direction or any. It honestly felt like I've seen Discovery Channel documentaries, David Attenborough's, that like stuff like that. There's so much more evocative.
For, you know what audience those are for. That's kind of, and people want a really clear, high definition shot of a polar bear or whatever.
And also the emotion of the thing does its job. Like there's a clear intention of the piece.
It's educational.
It's evocative.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is it wasn't evocative enough
at all.
And actually for me as a film goer, it wasn't evocative enough. And then again, like what I said in the beginning, you go back to climate change documentaries. I don't think a normal audience member would watch this.
I think that's really important. And I think just the two films we referenced already, Koyaanisqatsi, if I'm saying that right, and Erde, at least are for the art house viewer. I'd say Erde could blend over into
I think
a traditional
mainstream
audience.
audiences could watch Erde.
But with this film, again, because it's being sold like that. If it was a film that was like, it was just two filmmakers or a group of filmmakers that got a rush from shooting these waves and it's like, here's the here's what they shot. That's fine. I can watch that on the internet. You don't need to waste European soft money on that. And then on top of that, selling it as a climate change film, which doesn't even engage with an art house audience, but even less would emotionally drive a larger audience to actually think about climate change.
I kind of think, I actually think it could engage a
larger
audience. Yeah, just because it's so surface.
But in its format, in its hour and a half long cinematic.
I mean, I don't know. Depend how they put it out. It's not like a edgy or seat film, but I feel like it's so kind of superficial and empty that in a way it might be able to just be sold on the kind of superficial qualities of it, which could be attractive to people.
I could see like college kids getting stoned and watching this.
Yeah, that's exactly what it reminds me of. The kind of shit documentary people like who I was with living with at university would get stoned to and watch, but not take anything in because there's really...
Because you don't have to. You can just watch it and hang out with your friends.
But I don't think it's healthy just to berate films for the sake of it. But on that point, I don't think that it actually... I think those stoner documentaries have more value than something like this, because this is in some middle ground where it doesn't even know.
But I think that's what it is. I admit it doesn't know it, but I basically think that probably is its value. It's something that like
I think it does.
Students can get stoned to, and kind of feel a bit like intellectually nourished, but
minus the first 20 minutes, which I wanted to say
great.
would work as a short film. I would watch that as a short film.
Yeah, that would be great.
The kind of wide shots and the when you figure out what's happening with the drilling.
There's a kind of thriller element to it, because you kind of, or a mystery, you don't know what's going on.
Getting cars out of the lake is crazy. No, the first 20 minutes.
But then
really
it does basically become what we're saying, which is like a cool skiing compilation film without the skis. But actually, on the Russian streaming website, whatever thing I was on, the next film that came up like as a suggestion was a kind of like skiing stunts compilation video, which seems quite fitting. They got Russians are notoriously good with algorithms, so that apparently that figures.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I guess in the end, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, again, go back to the same thing. It's like, what are these films for, really? I think what is documentary today, and I have thought about that today a lot, because obviously, no, we don't rely on the news anymore.
Or you shouldn't rely on the news
well,
anymore.
we shouldn't, yeah, because it's extremely biased, and we're kind of looking more and more at documentary as a sort of investigative journalism. And obviously, there are all kinds of documentaries. They don't all have to be, impact documentaries in a way.
No, but if you're going to sell it as one,
I think that they have.
it was, it was dangerous. It didn't even look dangerous to make. You're saying it was, and I believe the filmmakers. But in the other sense, it wasn't even dangerous politically. It wasn't dangerous in any sense of the word. So yeah, I mean, for 2:00 in the afternoon, Crouch End, it wasn't the worst viewing experience I've ever had. I didn't walk out of it. I definitely had, one of the annoying things about it, I'm reading Paul Schrader's Transcendental Cinema again, right? And or Transcendental Style, whatever the title is. He talks about slow cinema to evoke boredom, but some filmmakers use slow cinema techniques or transcendental style to evoke meditative
you sort of get
state,
lost
right?
in it, yeah.
The movie doesn't even do that.
I think it does it in some bits.
For 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it is. It does accomplish that at times. I guess it just it didn't come together. And maybe if they had chopped off 30 minutes, it maybe would have.
I think it's
maybe it would have been a Vimeo staff pick.
Yeah, I think maybe. I think it's not meditative because it's so heavy, like the director's presence and the feeling of them doing shit with the
feeling cool
and like the overbearing technology and stuff. It's more like it kind of masquerades as meditation, but it's basically like I don't know, more like 90s MTV or something.
And the thing is, more and more, and every time I go to film festivals and talk to people, more and more people are saying films are getting made for film festival audiences. And it's just like, although I love that, I love those films, but it's just especially a film like this.
Was this a film? What festival?
Yeah, it was when I went to Reykjavik, and there was a programmer there that was talking about like films and like getting films into festivals and blah blah blah. And he was basically just saying like, well, more and more films are made for film festivals. So at the end of the day, the more pretentious and the more the more it speaks to film to people in the industry.
But how can that be a good business model when
it's not? But it's only a few films that are getting out and actually gonna break the mainstream. The rest will probably stay in that little circle. Will end up on video on demand platforms, but will still speak to that same circle of people.
But I would argue the film did not even do that. I mean, I don't consider myself part of the circle, but I don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is more about the shots and the accomplishment. I'm sure cinematographers love it.
I read quite a cool. I don't know if it's cool, but it's just kind of a coincidence. It was a Criterion top 10 by this American filmmaker called Lev Kalman. He makes like these kind of weird 16mm things. They're like kind of artifact films. But he said he was talking about a Criterion collection, Criterion DVD called shout out Criterion, called Science is Fiction. They're these short films by a French documentarian called Jean Painlevé. Not sure if I'm saying that right, but he's like a sort of early to mid 20th century kind of science nature documentarian, but his films are mostly black and white, and they're kind of very small and kind of modest, but they capture things like crustaceans in quite simple but quite poetic ways you wouldn't expect. Sort of like basically the opposite scale to this, where rather than being about a topic as grand as water, it's as small as like what crabs are like underwater, things that you wouldn't have seen back then, but even now it feels like watching them and their behavior and the way they act feels very kind of humbling. But he in his description of this film feels quite relevant to Aquarela. He says, "I think we're in a moment now that's making our nature documentaries worse. With HD, HDR, and CGI, they seamlessly illustrate already decided upon science, making the unhuman world seem as knowable and digestible as a Pixar fable. This is why, as impressive as they can be, they're disposable. We abandon the HD doc when the 4K one comes along." And I'm imagining when the next technology comes along,
Yeah.
everyone will forget about this. But
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely fitting, and it's funny because it's like you were talking about those short films. It's actually the smaller things that speak more to us on our day-to-day lives, and why an image of a turtle with a straw is more effective than these HD images. Yeah, that's very fitting. Honey boy.
I'll start.
Yeah.
I love the film. It's got problems. I think the script was very fucking good. I think structurally.
do we need to say what the film's about at all? I don't know. Does that help?
Shia LaBeouf.
That's the pitch.
He's a child actor. His father is slightly abusive, and he's trying to make it. I assume he's on the show we now know as Even Stevens.
Yeah.
And the movie cuts between 1995, I believe, when he's a child and his father's taking him to shows and stuff and reading his lines with him, and when Shia LaBeouf is in an institution, a rehab,
And that actually happened as well.
where he wrote the screenplay for the movie. So,
And
So
also
very autobiographical.
him and his dad are living in like a shady motel in somewhere in California, I guess.
yeah,
And also his dad is his employee because he gets paid to be his chaperone. That's kind of like the most interesting thing in a way, is the idea of the kid
is providing for his family.
Yeah, and there's
and
like
employing.
a contract basically of worker and employer between them, and also the dad being jealous because the dad was a wannabe actor. He's
a clown.
He's a clown. He's a successful clown, but an unsuccessful actor. And it's a sort of psycho drama. That's kind of like an thing to that.
Psycho in that it looks at a psychology, or it sort of
well, like a sort
trauma.
of psychological character. Yeah.
I mean,
psychological kind of chamber drama, I guess, 'cause it's mostly in the motel. There's a little bit.
I reckon you could get away with pitching it as a coming of age film as well.
Definitely.
It's almost two simultaneous coming of age.
Yeah,
film.
it's like a coming of age later on in
not
life.
directly,
and then
traditionally, but
yeah.
But what does for the coming of age I get it in the second part because it's so kind of obvious that while he's writing this script, he's coming to terms with his relationship with his dad. But in the first part, apart from the kind of implausible relationship he has with FK Twigs, where it's implied he loses his virginity to a sex worker played by FK Twigs. What does he learn?
Sorry, just on that, I didn't get he lost his virginity. I got that.
Well, she's like naked in his room.
They're just cuddling.
I think to me, because it cuts from them going to bed, and then the morning when the dad comes in, that's a sort of
no. But then the dad thinks that it's that, but it's actually not that. That's what I got.
Anyway, apart from
and he gives her money. But apart from that, to answer your question, I think that
what does he kind of
the moment for me of his change, whether it's a coming of age traditionally speaking or not, is when he tells his father. He has like the big talk with his dad, and he's watching. There's a moment, it's maybe 3/4 of the way through, when he's watching his dad from outside of the motel watch the show that he's in, and he's preparing to talk to him. You know, he's got a tear rolling down his face, and the dad notices, and then the boy whose name I can't remember because it's not Shia and Otis. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Goes into the motel and confronts his father, and he basically says, "Look, I want you to be a better dad.
Yeah.
I want you to stop, beating on me, like both emotionally and physically, and I want this, that, and the other." And then the father kind of gives what you think is a loving response, an understanding response, but then just ends up beating the shit out of him, basically.
And and I think that is great, not great, obviously, but the way the dad never changes, and there's no there's never any reconciliation, I think it's really true.
Up until the last, even in the last minute, there's still no
Mhm.
change because he says,
Yeah. I feel like quite a lot of the film is naive, not necessarily in a bad way, but just like there are some quite, especially the second part, the idea of, I'm sure it's Shia LaBeouf being quite earnest and being like, this really helped me writing this screenplay, but the stuff with Lucas Hedges, who plays Shia LaBeouf when he's older,
who's brilliant.
he's doing what he always does. That part feels quite kind of naive, not in a bad way, but what feels more sort of like lived in about the first part is the fact his dad just never learns anything and just stays exactly how he is, which is sad, but I think that's how it normally.
Well, I think it's like
is.
It's also just a really honest portrayal of recovery of trauma, because, and I think that's what I think makes it so powerful, is that it is a depiction of one person trying to overcome trauma with a very with the realization that it needs to come just from them. Like, you know, it was a process where it obviously needed to come from just him, not his father, because his father wasn't going to change. And I think what makes it kind of special is that it's not self-pitying, despite the fact that Shia LaBeouf has publicly kind of had his sort of nervous breakdown. You know,
himself.
do you know when he's had his nervous breakdown in public, and this is this almost could to some people be seen as an apology.
Yeah.
I mean, well, obviously it's him working through his trauma, but it could in some ways be seen as like as some kind of apology, and some people might be like, can he make up for, you know, essentially being an egomaniac? But I think he does, because it's, you know, there's no self-pity in it. It's really honest.
There's a line in the movie where he says, I'm a narcissist I'm an egomaniac with an inferiority complex.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah, it was
Sounds
good
like
line.
an Eminem lyric.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good line.
Yeah, I don't know. I to me, the second part didn't feel as like alive as the first part. Maybe because of the sort of self, like realizing what he was going through. The kind of, maybe I think there's a bit of, you know, it was weird in a way. The second part, which is nearer the present, feels more sentimental and nostalgic than the first part.
What do you mean by the second part? Like when
when it's
kids,
him in when he's in rehab, when it's Lucas Hedges
in rehab? Yeah, I know.
But
what you mean.
am I remembering wrong that it cuts between the two over time?
Yeah.
And so do you mean this? Oh, the
But
second.
they're quite distinct. I mean.
But you don't mean the second half of the movie runtime. You mean the second scenario.
So that's right. I mean, in the present, or if you call that the present, which is him in rehab, there's a sort of kind of melancholic tone, but kind of sentimental. And in the first part, when he's with his dad in the motel as his younger self, that to me is more kind of, that feels more present.
It's
and
more honest.
painful. Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe not more honest, but more real maybe.
Yeah.
And it just made me think, why are we? It could be better done, but also why do we need this?
Why do we need
rehab?
the recovery? I know. You know what? That's actually a really good question, because I feel like there was a moment when I was watching it where I wasn't a fan of the rehab bits, because I guess they just felt a bit contrived. Like some of the sort of lessons or sort of tasks that he was given, even though these kinds of things do happen in rehab, it felt like we didn't spend enough. We weren't given the time there. So it felt a little bit more contrived. It didn't feel as honest. You know, all you got from it was really the rubber band flicking thing, and yeah, there were bits, but I don't think it would be the same film without the idea of this boy recovering and sort of looking back, because I feel like we have seen a film, maybe you guys know which film, but I know that we have seen some kind of film about, you know, a young child growing up in an abusive environment. But I don't know if we've seen the film that you know, essentially Shia LaBeouf wrote, which is about his recovery.
Yeah, there's not much work about the ways in which we have to recover. I think it's overall it's a hopeful film, and I think to your point, Theo, that the dad never changes, I think that that's what the last scene, which isn't really a spoiler, that it doesn't change the movie, that the last scene is about, is the father hasn't changed, but the
But
character
he
is
has
okay
changed,
with that
but
because
yeah.
he has changed and he's
Yeah.
recovered from that trauma.
Yeah.
And yeah, as an example in autobiography and art as trauma, I'm sure I think that there's a moment early on when he's arrested, and he does that whole "you don't know how good I am at what I do" thing in
Yeah.
the back of the cop car. That I think was super recent, like
Yeah.
not less than, it couldn't have been less than 2 years ago, but I wouldn't say any more. And I think that that's just super powerful. He's with this film, he's working through his entire life trauma.
Yeah, publicly, and doing it public. I mean, there is one question that I did ask myself: is would this film be as powerful if we didn't know about his trajectory? And because I think part of the reason that I really, really enjoy this is because I also see an artist trying to find themselves, and an artist try to do random things like performance art and trying to do all these crazy things, but then at the end discovering that he can't escape the traumas, and actually the art that he needs to focus on is the trauma that's in him, and and which I think so many people as artists can relate to. So but which is why I just really liked it. I got online and I started reading all about his life, and I was like, really, I forgot about him acting so young. But there is a question of like, would it be that powerful if we didn't see basically Shia LaBeouf grow up in front of us, or with us, really, because we're around his age?
Yeah,
So I would say yes, but I think I'd have different criticisms about the script, and I think though the flaws, like his relationship with the girl in the second half, and I think those would be more apparent. But what I would say is that watching the film, even though I knew that this kid was supposed to be Shia LaBeouf and that Shia LaBeouf's playing his father, it never once took me out, and I wasn't going, oh, this is this actor playing his abusive father. Like, it still worked in a container on its own for me, even though it's very obviously, there's just some hair change and makeup, costume change, but it's very obviously him. But
I think 'cause it helps that it does feel quite specific as well, like a kid and his dad living in a motel, riding a motorbike from the set back to the motel each day. That's not like a typical child actor's experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't find him uninteresting, but I don't find him particularly interesting. So the idea of it being a film about him didn't really draw me to it. And also, he didn't direct it either, so it's not like the autobiography is completely transparent. So I think there's a layer removed, which maybe means
which
it stands on its own. But I don't know. Yeah, Alma Har'el
directed
it. Who's I think she's a friend of his, or they've collaborated.
She's done a
before.
few things with him. She's done a few music videos, I think.
And I saw a Q&A with her. She said he liked her first documentary so much he funded her second one. So I guess they have a good relationship.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
I'm just looking at the scripts and trying to work out that.
And apparently also another just interesting thing, she said that he didn't have any input in the edit at all. He didn't even go to the edit. He saw the final cut. He didn't. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
He didn't see any work in progress.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there on set when they were when he wasn't needed when they were shooting.
Yeah.
So
because for the most part, I haven't read the entire script, but scanning through it, it does look like the direction or the cut has followed the script pretty closely.
Yeah, I guess it's quite a tight script. It's the other thing, they filmed it in like 15 days or something, which is quite mad. All the motel stuff was done in 9 days. Yeah, I think actually an interesting comparison. I don't know. Have you guys seen Mid-90s Jonah Hill?
Yeah, I did see it, and I wasn't the biggest fan.
I wasn't
not
very
fan.
good.
It's a bit of a turkey.
It feels like him trying to ape Harmony Korine, who makes a guest
Yeah.
appearance, by the way, is somebody coming out of the bathroom
in
mid-90s.
in mid-90s, yeah.
And it just
He-
didn't quite come
Did
off.
you see it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the parallels are quite strong because like it's two
Yes, there are,
popular
yeah.
or famous actors at similar age making nostalgic films about their
Their
kind of
childhoods,
prepubescent selves,
yeah.
basically
And
coming
it's-
of age.
What's the actor's name?
Lucas Hedges
Yeah.
is
He's in
both
it.
playing
An aggressive
An
young
angry-
man.
playing
But
angry,
is mid-90s autobiographical to the
yeah,
degree of the
oh,
abuse
I
and the
think
mom?
he said it wasn't like narratively, but I think the sort of environment and it
Mhm.
feels like why would you make that film if it wasn't at least partly autobiographical because it's kind of niche.
Yeah, but I think the difference is that Honey Boy is, as far as I know, is taken from actual situations.
yeah, no, I think, and also it's just the story
Well, it's just
is more
narrative. Yeah, narratively
specific.
much stronger.
But it's kind of interesting that they both got released at the same time, and Jonah Hill directed mid-90s, and Shia LaBeouf didn't, but Jonah Hill doesn't act in mid-90s. Shia LaBeouf does act in Honey Boy, and I feel like that was probably a good decision from Shia LaBeouf because, Jonah Hill's presence in mid-90s is just a little bit like,
as a director.
yeah, it just feels like a bit of a drag. I don't know. There are certain sort of stylistic ticks. Like there's a lot of jump cuts and kind of they were saying this sort of Harmony Korine or Larry Clark thing, which just it feels a bit like outdated and I don't know, not that interesting for everyone. Maybe like it's cool for him.
Yeah, he's just scratching the itch of what he wished he could do.
Yeah.
I mean, he did make clear publicly that he had consulted Martin Scorsese before.
I think
making the film.
Did he?
Yeah,
Oh.
I think
for
that's,
directing tips.
That's very
Or advice.
noticeable in the film. No. And then the one other thing that's weirdly similar is both films, Jonah Hill and Shia LaBeouf, feature younger avatars for themselves having implausible sexual relationships with hot, much older ethnic women
That's true.
as like turning points, which is just bizarre.
Do you think
I want to
that-
know more about that synchronicity.
Did you guys think the FKA Twigs storyline thing was real? You
No.
said it. You
I
don't
think it
it's
was a
real?
structural
I feel like
ploy.
it probably was somewhat real in the same way I reckon Jonah Hill probably lost his virginity because otherwise it's too it's too uninteresting.
I
feature unless it actually I don't know.
So the reason I didn't think it was real because it was, and this might be the difference, is that I don't think that it was clear or even intended that Shia LaBeouf lost his virginity or the Otis loses virginity to her. I think it was leading us towards that, but in actual fact, it was just a platonic relationship. And then when the father comes home drunk, it's kind of this dramatic irony where we know that they haven't had sex.
The father had tried to
Yeah.
sort of hit on her as
Yeah.
well.
To me,
so
that wasn't clear or like meaningful.
Mhm.
I think it's probably the weaker section.
I mean, I think there was maybe a tiny bit of a problem with
But
just her character.
that's
she
why
was a
I
bit
think
she
it
a
was
bit-
false.
It looked like they
Yeah.
had to cut around her acting quite a lot as well, which maybe didn't help with the
Dialogue.
clarity or the
But
meaning.
why did that happen?
I don't think she's acted before. I don't know. I
Okay.
mean, she there's
I
a
thought
mistake.
it was an
mistake.
accent
Why did they
thing. Yeah, no,
cast
that
her?
happens. I thought it was an accent thing, huh?
Why did they cast her?
I think
Uh,
'cause she's cool.
Because she's cool, yeah.
Actually, I did think about it a bit more. I feel like the reason both of them have put in these scenes is because it's a sort of perfect storm of maybe being the sympathy of possibly being abused, but then the macho credit for having sex with a much older and hot woman, which is for those two guys who I'm sure have quite complicated but also quite basic egos, that is
Mhm.
the pinnacle of how they want to be viewed as sort of damaged but
Damaged,
strong.
but yeah. And it just made me think about a sort of some films that have come up recently, which are all wonderful, which kind of deal with sort of young men growing up in abusive environments. Obviously Honey Boy, mid-90s, Minding the Gap, which was amazing. These are really, really interesting films. I think it really sort of brings together this sort of 90s generation of boys who essentially escaped abusive households, by skating, and, it was so part of our culture. I just wonder if there's space or how people would respond to the sister in that relationship. Obviously, I'm the only woman here, and I'm talking about what if we start hearing the female version of these stories? And I don't think they would be as romantic. I don't think that we would be able to see them in the way that we're seeing them now, where it's, I don't know, I just somehow it would be a lot more dreary.
These are also two films that were shot in LA. I mean, Minding the Gap is like the East Coast,
Minding the Gap is East Coast. Yes, it is about, it is American, but
it's two different worlds.
I guess I'm just, I guess that my question is, if this was from a female perspective, because let's face it, all of these families probably had a sister in there, they would just, I don't even know what I'm saying. I just know that they would not find the same kind of response or even be accepted as much. It would just be like, it's almost like it's too taboo for abuse to be spoken in context of women, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It also, it wouldn't be as cool either.
It wouldn't be as cool.
What would the sister in Even Stevens's film look like?
Yeah. Maybe Fish Tank has a little bit of that.
Which is definitely an influence on this film.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but Fish Tank is a good example of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
but it would
I
be
guess
cool,
it does exist.
I think, to see that like equivalent of a famous actress creating a sort of nostalgic film about their childhood.
Like Scarlett Johansson.
Maybe not her, but she was a child actor though.
Yeah.
Who else could do it?
I think it would just be interesting
Drew
to see
Barrymore.
these. Yeah, Drew Barrymore. And she also had a really interesting
She's a bit too
life.
old.
She also did a lot of drugs.
Well, she did lots of drugs, and she has quite an interesting experience as a child actor.
But I think your
who
point
of the same age.
That's why. That's a good point.
It would be nine. It would be that's what I thought you were kind of saying was that view of the 90s for men, I guess.
What are the twins called again? The
Mary Kate and Ashley.
Mary Kate and Ashley.
I don't know.
Yeah, they're about that age. But yeah, I guess the nostalgia, but it's also like it's a mixture of like nostalgia of the 90s and this sort of like balance between being damaged and man, but also being like quite powerful and
yeah, I think it's the last time men sort of, not the last time, but men could be kind of outwardly macho and not have to really give a shit about like political consequences, which I suppose also coincides with these two guys, Jonah Hill and Shia LaBeouf, becoming famous, so they have more responsibilities. But also, we definitely now live more in an age where you have consequences for stuff. And I think they both look at the 90s as being a bit more of an innocent time where you were free of consequences.
But I would add to that, I think that the two films, whether intentionally or not, I mean, just to add, I wouldn't be so hard on Shia LaBeouf because I do think he's genuine he's very sincere and he's aware of the issue of the macho issue. But I think the two films also have this, they deal with that generational issue of skate culture
It's boomers who basically would treat children that way or would be.
There's that, and then even though skate culture. The music, some of the time, was very progressive, and the bands were quite progressive politically speaking, or some of them could be definitely. Mm-hmm. But general American culture was moving, towards more away from machoism. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there were still these.
It's like subcultures and pockets.
But there were still these expectations on men and young men. But at the same time, and they were also there was still like rape culture and you know, rife sexism and kind of traditional ideas of heterosexual
Yeah, I mean, I
relationships.
see that a lot. I mean, I even see that with like, you know, my brother. Like my parents don't understand the idea that he wants like a simple life that does not involve career goals. And I was like, well, what's wrong with a man being a house husband? And they can't wrap their head around that, you know. And it's just kind of like.
But there's that bit in mid-90s that gets at the macho thing a little bit. And one of the, I mean, I know that they're just kids, but that makes it even more poignant when he says thank you for something, for a cigarette or something. He says, don't say thank you. People will think you're gay or something. You know?
But then the other guy says you can
say thank you.
Exactly, and the guy says no. It's just that's just good manners or something like that. And
there were some little moments like that in the film, which were
I guess they're just like all of these contradictions of growing up at that
but
time.
the tensions of changing political landscapes, I guess.
Yeah, which is really interesting. I guess the female equivalent of that generation right now, even though it doesn't have sort of that kind of abuse, is Lady Bird. You know, I don't know if she had. I don't know if Lady Bird dealt with any kind of tensions, with those generational tensions as well as mid-19s or Honey Boy did.
She said the first draft didn't. Actually, that was interesting. The first draft didn't have the rehab bit in it.
Oh no way!
So it was 90 pages of him as a kid.
That is.
Well, I don't know how many, but yeah, it was just the
and
kid.
so then how did they decide to put the rehab? Because I mean, that's I think what makes it.
That would have been a good question as well. Yeah, I don't know.
Huh.
There were too many aspiring writer directors in the Q&A who were just.
Who were they talking to? Shia or?
No, it was just Alma
Alma
Har'el.
Alma's got a following.
Yeah, it was a lot of people. Oh, I follow you on Instagram.
Yeah,
I hadn't realised
really
that, and they'd be like, your Instagram page is really inspiring or something.
Yeah, I mean,
I felt like a bit of a millennial. Not well, I don't know, whatever. I felt a bit old, not
millennial or whatever. Well, she founded this Free the Bid thing, which is about women working in advertising. So she's gotten really big, and she's become like a really big advocate for that. Yeah.
So she's sort of like a bit of an influencer, kind of.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Is this her first feature?
Her first fiction. She's done a few documentaries, which I haven't seen.
I've heard they're very good.
And they're really good. Yeah, I've heard that they're really good.
My friend said Bombay Beach and the other one, Love True.
Yeah, my friend saw Bombay Beach and she said it was really good. And also she shot this stuff on her own. Like she kind of just went out, shot these documentaries for a while. Bombay Beach, I think, is about a really poor community on a beach in California. And she sort of shot that over a couple years and followed a few characters there. So it kind of makes sense that Shia LaBeouf would be attracted to her work because I think she kind of looks at sort of marginalized communities in the U.S.
And it's sort of poetic neorealism.
Yeah, she has like a bit of dreamy stuff, I think, in her documentaries as well.
I think that's how he sees himself.
Yeah.
Real and poetic.